Welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're going through a real mix of your sources like personal reflections, business insights, and we even have some news snippets. It's really everything from, well, thoughts on grief and resilience, and then like even the wild world of tech and politics. Yeah, it's going to be a lot to cover. Our mission is to kind of like distill this all down into key takeaways and hopefully spark some, aha moments for you. So are you ready to try and connect the dots on this one?
Absolutely. Let's see what patterns emerge from this tapestry of information.
Okay, so one theme that I thought was really interesting was this whole resilience and growth thing. Like the no mud, no lotus idea. It's
Yep.
about, finding beauty and strength even when things are really tough. It's kind of fascinating that this idea isn't just some philosophy thing. One of your sources, Faith Guide, talks about finding meaning in difficult times, like saying that pain is part of life, but we get to choose how we react to it.
That's pretty powerful, right? It's not about, pretending the pain isn't there. It's more about seeing the potential for growth and learning from those experiences. It's about finding the strength to move forward when it feels impossible.
Exactly. And it's just like that saying, don't let your past like dictate your future. It's so easy to get stuck in those negative thought patterns, but we really can shape our own stories.
This really ties into the whole growth mindset thing, which one of your sources, Life's Learnings Part 3, goes into. It's about looking at challenges as chances to learn and grow instead of roadblocks.
Yeah. And remember that Sears example.
Oh, right. Sears, the retail part may have failed, but you know what? Their financial services actually did really well. It's a perfect example of spotting an opportunity within a challenge and changing with the times.
Totally. And doesn't that example also connect to the idea of bootstrapping? Like using what you already have to get ahead.
Exactly. It's more about working together than going it alone, right?
It's like that interdependence idea, not just independence.
Exactly. And there's this perfect example you gave in Life's Learnings Part 3. It's the one about the Wharton class test. Remember, the students were allowed to talk to each other for one question, and it actually made the whole class do better.
Oh, that's a great point. It shows how working together can lead to better results, even in situations where we usually think it's all about individual effort. But how do you connect those growth mindset and bootstrapping ideas to leadership and innovation?
Well, leaders who have a growth mindset, they're more likely to encourage their teams to, experiment and take risks. And that's like the foundation of innovation. Like Life's Learnings 3-7-11 says the work of leaders is change. Leaders thrive in dynamic environments. They're always challenging the status quo.
Yeah, that really goes with that quote from the same source. Certainty and routine breed complacency. Leaders need to be proactive, not just reacting, always trying to make things better. But how can leaders actually create an environment that encourages innovation, especially when failure is always a risk?
That's a great question. The key is to shift how we think about failure. Instead of seeing it as a setback, leaders can frame it as a chance to learn something valuable. Do you remember that quote? Success does not breed success, it breeds failure. It is failure which breeds success. It's like a powerful reminder that messing up can be a step toward getting it right.
Wow, that's really something to think about. It's all about creating a culture where people feel safe to take risks, even if it means they might not succeed. How do you encourage that kind of risk-taking, especially when people might be afraid to fail?
That's where scaffolding comes in, from Life's Learnings Part 3. It's about giving people support systems to overcome challenges and gain confidence. The source mentions coaching, and this might surprise you, doubt as ways to do this.
Wait, doubt? Doubt can actually be a good thing. That seems counterintuitive.
Yeah, it's not about discouraging people. It's more about using certain types of doubt to motivate. Like the source says, when people are doubted by someone they don't respect, it can push them harder to prove those doubters wrong. It's kind of like turning that doubt into fuel, wouldn't you say?
Now, that's a new perspective. It challenges that idea that doubt is always bad. Okay, I want to change gears for a bit and talk about something I'm really into. The power of the arts and how they affect us. Life's Learnings Part 3 says that we're all feeling beings who think, and it talks about these 8 core emotions. But how can art help us really understand and process all those emotions?
Well, one key thing the source points out is the difference between emotions and feelings. Emotions are those gut reactions we have to things, while feelings are how we understand those emotions in our bodies.
So it's like emotions come first and feelings follow. But how do we bridge that gap? Where does art fit in?
That's where art can be so powerful. It gives us this language that goes beyond words, a way to tap into feelings that are hard to explain. And one way that plays out is through sound therapy.
Oh, yes. Like vibroacoustic therapy, which uses those low-frequency sound waves to help with physical and mental healing. Imagine sound waves just kind of vibrating through your body and helping your cells heal.
Exactly. And there's real science behind it too. It involves, the production of nitric oxide, which is important for cells and blood flow. Did you know that the notes C and G are considered soothing because they resonate with the Earth's core frequency?
That's wild. It really shows how something as simple as sound can have such a big impact on how we feel. And it reminds me of another point from the source about how much we all want to learn. The source says that our brain is structured to build new connections and constantly evolve. So bringing art into our lives, whether it's through education, work, or just for fun, can actually make us better learners. What do you think about that?
I think that's a really important point. There's so much research now that shows how experimenting with art can help our minds in so many ways. Have you ever thought about how being in a museum or listening to music actually changes your senses and emotions?
That's true. It's all about developing what the source calls an aesthetic mindset, which is basically being aware of how we experience things through our senses.
Hmm.
But how can we actually practice that kind of mindset in our everyday lives?
One way is to just pay more attention to the sensory details around us. Like, really notice the colors, shapes, and textures of things. Listen to the sounds of nature, how you breathe, the music you love. The more we use our senses, the more we build that aesthetic mindset, and the benefits are huge. Less stress, less anxiety, less pain, and it can even help with trauma. There's this powerful quote in the source that says it all. The arts and aesthetics change us, and as a result, they can transform our lives. But here's the thing. Even with all those great benefits, our brains are actually wired to focus on negative emotions because of, survival instincts.
That's so interesting. It seems strange, but it makes sense when you think about evolution. The source even says that bad memories are made 5 times quicker and last 5 times longer than good ones. How do we fight against that negativity bias?
Well, one way is to just make a point of seeking out positive experiences and finding healthy ways to process those negative ones. And that brings us back to the power of art. Art gives us a safe place to explore and express those difficult emotions, helping us make sense of tough experiences and find healing.
I see what you mean. It's about finding ways to take those negative emotions and turn them into something creative and expressive. Which actually leads us to another important idea from Life's Learning's Part 3, creativity. The source defines it as the ability to imagine and come up with original ideas and solutions.
Yes, it's about being open to leaving behind what we know and embracing the unknown. It takes courage to experiment, play around, and explore new possibilities.
And that willingness to explore is so important, not just for our own growth, but for how society moves forward too. Now, getting back to the sources, let's dive into something that might seem a little surprising at first. Quitting and commitment. You included this great quote from Life's Learnings 3:7-11. Everyone asks how you got together. Nobody asks how you stayed together. It's interesting because it points out how important it is to not just start something, but to keep it going, which can be way harder.
That's such a good point. We always celebrate the beginnings of things like starting a business or a new relationship, but we don't talk enough about how much work it takes to make those things last. And that leads us to this idea of quitting, which a lot of people misunderstand.
Yeah, quitting almost always sounds bad. We see it as failing or being weak. But Life's Learnings 3:7-11 really challenges that. It says context matters. Sometimes quitting can be the bravest and smartest thing you can do. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the source makes a really good point. We can get so focused on never giving up that we forget to ask ourselves if what we're doing is even good for us anymore. Staying in a bad situation, like a job you hate or a relationship that's toxic, can actually hold us back from finding things that match our goals and values.
That's so true. It's easy to think that quitting means we failed. But sometimes quitting can be what lets us really go after our dreams in a better way.
It's about realizing that we might need to change our plans as we learn and grow.
Okay, let's get into something that's always in the news. The political scene. One of the sources, Random Insights beginning 8/19/21 to 2/11/22, brought up Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. It's this crazy story of ambition, lies, and how Silicon Valley can be so tempting. Holmes was supposed to be the next Steve Jobs. She built this company worth billions, all on this promise of a revolutionary blood test, but it was all fake.
It's a captivating story. It really shows how dangerous it can be to have too much ambition and believe in something without enough proof.
It's crazy how much money Holmes got from investors. Almost $1 billion from some really famous people. At her peak, she was worth $4.5 billion. It shows how easy it is to get caught up in a charismatic leader's vision, doesn't it?
It's kind of typical of venture capitalists, especially in tech. They fund people with big personalities, even if their ideas haven't been properly tested. Sometimes a good story is more powerful than facts and critical thinking.
And that brings us to another big name in politics, Donald Trump. Even though he's not in the spotlight as much anymore, he's still really influential. The source says that Trump is both the overwhelming favorite among Republicans for 2024 and their continuing spiritual leader.
Yeah, his actions definitely show how much influence he still has and how much he wants to change the political system. He's been busy trying to change how states officially confirm elections, and he's even gotten rid of people who disagreed with him.
It's a reminder that his influence goes way beyond his time as president, and he's still a major force in American politics.
And then there's how he's affecting government jobs, specifically by creating the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy in charge.
Yeah, their plans to cut spending and regulations and fire government workers have definitely made people nervous. And the possibility of losing the option to work remotely is another big worry. It's a big change from that image of a secure government job.
It makes you wonder how these changes will affect the next generation of government workers, especially Gen Z. They're used to flexibility and using technology at work, so these changes might make government jobs less attractive.
It's a real concern. It could lead to talented people leaving the government, making it harder to find and keep the best people. And then there's Trump's economic policies. He's been really critical of Biden for rising prices, but some of the things he wants to do could actually make the problem worse.
Yeah, he's talked about lowering interest rates, which could actually fuel inflation. And he wants higher tariffs and to deport undocumented immigrants, which could lead to worker shortages and drive up prices even more.
It's a good reminder that the economy is complicated. There are usually no easy answers, and actions in one area can have big effects on everything else.
It's like a giant game of economic chess where every move has consequences. But it's not just the political world that's facing big challenges. Your sources also paint a pretty dark picture of what's happening globally, especially with the war in Ukraine and the growing conflict between Israel and Hamas.
It's tragic. These conflicts are a stark reminder that peace is fragile, and violence has terrible consequences. The war in Ukraine, with Russia's invasion and all the fighting, has caused so much suffering and loss.
And those recent Hamas attacks on Israel have started a really scary conflict. People are worried it could lead to a bigger war that would be devastating for the entire Middle East. It shows that even though we're all connected globally, the threat of war is still very real.
These events really emphasize the importance of finding peaceful solutions through diplomacy and dialogue. But they also show that we need to be prepared and resilient, able to adapt to situations that change quickly.
It's not the most cheerful thought, but I think it's important to acknowledge these global challenges, even as we talk about things like personal growth and innovation. They're all part of what it means to be human.
I agree. And on top of all that, we're also seeing technology, especially AI, advancing at an incredible pace.
It's like this strange paradox. We're making huge progress technologically, but we're also facing some of the biggest and most difficult challenges humanity has ever seen.
It's a time full of both incredible possibilities and deep uncertainty.
Exactly. And that's why we need to think carefully about the power and responsibility that comes with knowledge.
The sources we've talked about give us a lot of information, insights, and different ways of looking at things. But it's up to each of us to figure out what's really important, connect the dots, and use that knowledge in a good way.
It's not just about taking in information. It's about really thinking about it, questioning what we believe, considering different opinions, and ultimately forming our own conclusions.
It's about becoming active participants in shaping the world, not just watching from the sidelines.
That's such a powerful idea. And as we head into the last part of our deep dive, we'll explore how we can use this knowledge to handle the challenges and opportunities that are ahead of us.
That's right. This deep dive is just the start. The real adventure comes from using what we've learned to make our own lives better and build the future we want.
It's amazing how these big trends of change and how we adapt play out in specific industries. One of your sources, Random Insights beginning 8/19/21 to 2/11/22, had a ton to say about the car industry, especially Tesla and Elon Musk.
Oh, yeah. Tesla's valuation hitting $1 trillion. That's more than the next 9 car companies combined. It's just mind-blowing, especially since they don't actually make that many cars.
Yeah, only about 500,000 a year, which is nothing compared to the 90 million cars produced globally. So the question is, what's making their value so high?
I think it's more than just seeing Tesla as a regular car company. They've kind of gone beyond that, haven't they? Remember that deal they made with Hertz?
Oh, yeah, the one where Hertz bought 100,000 Teslas for their rentals. It was a big risk, but it really made Tesla a major player, don't you think?
Totally. It showed that Tesla wasn't just for a small group of people anymore. They were going mainstream, and the market reacted big time. And of course, it helped make Musk super wealthy, at least for a while. It's a classic example of how a company can come in and change an entire industry, basically rewriting the rules.
Huh.
And speaking of shaking things up, your sources also talked about how Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, saw the potential of AI early on. He talked about how we need to evolve our knowledge and information productivity.
Mm.
It seems like he knew AI wasn't just a trend. It was a whole new way of dealing with information and making choices. And it's interesting how this isn't just happening within companies. The source mentions this competition between the US and China in AI. It's like a new space race, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it's a global fight to be the best in technology, which will have a huge impact on things like innovation, economic power, even national security. And then there's this wild card, DeepSeek, this Chinese AI lab that's building some really advanced AI and making it open source so anyone can use it for free.
That could really change things. It challenges the usual way of doing things with AI, like ChatGPT Pro, where you have to pay to access it.
Yeah.
What do you think this means for how accessible AI will be in the future?
It's hard to say for sure, but it brings up some good questions. Could this lead to AI being available to everyone, not just those who can afford it? Or will those big tech companies find a way to stay in control even with this open source thing happening?
Definitely something to watch closely. Speaking of unpredictable situations, we can't forget about all the drama at OpenAI, with Sam Altman getting fired and then rehired as CEO within just a few days.
Oh, yeah, that was wild. Everyone in the tech world was talking about it. And at the heart of it was this basic disagreement about what the future of AI should look like.
The board seemed to want to be cautious and in control, worried about what could happen if they released OpenAI's technology too quickly. But Altman seemed more interested in pushing the limits, not being afraid of the unknown, and seeing what AI could really do. It's like they were on totally different pages.
It shows how hard it is to balance moving forward with being responsible when it comes to technology. On one hand, there's so much potential for good, for fixing complicated problems and improving people's lives, but then there's also the worry about what could go wrong, AI being used in bad ways, or even getting out of control.
It's a tough balance.
Yeah.
And there's no clear right answer. You have the doomers on one side saying super intelligent AI could destroy us, and the tech optimists on the other who are excited about all the possibilities and aren't really worried about the risks.
And then there are the people who actually work on this stuff, caught in the middle of this whole philosophical debate. Remember when over 700 OpenAI employees said they'd quit and go to Microsoft with Altman if the board didn't bring him back?
It was pretty amazing. They were so loyal to him, which says a lot about his leadership. It also shows how important the culture and values of a company are, especially in fast-moving fields like AI.
Yeah, it reminds us the technology is ultimately made and controlled by people. And the choices they make, their values, will have a huge impact on how AI shapes the world.
Okay, so all this is happening against a backdrop of a lot of global uncertainty and political stuff going on. One of the forces, Random Insights beginning 8/19/21 to 2/11/22, dives into the current political landscape. We have a new president, Donald Trump is back, and it's already as unpredictable as his first term, maybe even more so.
The political world is a perfect example of constant change, right? Trump being back in power has definitely made things less predictable.
Totally. The source even points out how he's still trying to influence elections, how he's working to change how they're verified, and even removing officials who didn't support him.
It makes you worry about how fair and stable our democracy is. It underscores how important it is to protect our elections and make sure that power changes hands peacefully.
And then there's his impact on government jobs. He created DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy running it. Their plans to cut spending, regulations, and basically streamline the government have made a lot of federal employees anxious, especially those who are used to things being more stable.
It's a pretty big change in how the government is run, so it makes sense that a lot of government workers, especially younger ones like Gen Z, are feeling unsure about their jobs. They're used to having job security and benefits, and these changes could really disrupt that.
And the possibility of losing the option to work remotely is another worry. A lot of government employees like working remotely, so this could be a big problem for people who want a better work-life balance. It shows how the way we work is changing. That old 9-to-5 office job isn't as common anymore.
It's interesting to think about how Trump's policies will affect the economy, too. He's been criticizing Biden a lot for the rising prices we've seen. But some of the things he wants to do, like lowering interest rates, could actually make inflation worse.
Right. And his views on trade and immigration could backfire. He wants higher tariffs and stricter immigration policies, which could lead to businesses having trouble finding workers, higher costs for those businesses, and in the end, we all end up paying more for things.
It reminds us that economic issues are super complicated. Simple solutions rarely work. And often, what you do in one area can have unexpected effects on everything else.
It's like a big game of economic chess. Every move can change the whole game. But it's not just politics that's facing big challenges. The sources you gave also show how bad things are globally, particularly with the war in Ukraine and the conflict between Israel and Hamas getting worse.
It's really sad. These conflicts remind us that peace is delicate and violence is always destructive. The war in Ukraine, started by Russia, has caused so much suffering.
And those attacks by Hamas on Israel have made things even worse. There's a real fear that this could become a much bigger war, which would be disastrous for the whole Middle East. It shows that even though we're all connected in so many ways, war is still a very real threat.
These events show how important it is to work towards peace through diplomacy and talking to each other, but they also show how important it is to be prepared and resilient, to be able to adapt when things change quickly.
It's not the most uplifting thought, but I think it's important to acknowledge these global problems even as we talk about personal growth and innovation. It's all part of the human experience.
And in the middle of all this, we're seeing technology, particularly AI, advancing at an unbelievable speed.
It's a weird contradiction, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're making so much progress technologically, but at the same time, we're facing some of the biggest and most complicated problems we've ever seen.
Yeah, it's a time of both incredible opportunity and a lot of uncertainty.
And that's why we need to think carefully about the power and responsibility that comes with knowledge.
All these sources we've been talking about give us tons of information, insights, and different perspectives, but it's up to each of us to decide what's important, connect the dots, and use that knowledge in a good way.
It's not just about absorbing information. It's about really thinking about it, challenging what we believe, considering different opinions, and coming to our own conclusions.
It's about actively shaping the world around us, not just sitting back and watching.
That's such a powerful idea. And as we move into the final part of our deep dive, we'll talk about how we can use this knowledge to deal with the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead.
Wow, it's amazing how all these sources you pick touch on so many different parts of life. We've got like thoughts about dealing with loss and becoming stronger, the drive to innovate, even a peek into how messy politics can be. It really shows how complex the world is, doesn't it?
What's interesting is how these topics, which seem so different, actually all kind of connect. It shows how powerful knowledge can be when you're trying to figure out life. Yeah, totally. And speaking of figuring things out, one of your sources, Life's Learnings Part 3, goes deep into how grief affects us. It reminds us that everyone experiences loss at some point, and it's something we have to learn to deal with if we want to be emotionally healthy. Have you ever gone through a loss that really changed your perspective?
You know, the source talks about shifting from grief to growth, emphasizing that even when something terrible happens, we still have the power to choose how we react. That really stuck with me.
It is a powerful idea.
Okay.
It reminds me of something from your Faith God source. It says, if you are a lamp for someone else, it will brighten your path. Helping others can be such a powerful way to find comfort and purpose, even when we're hurting ourselves.
It's interesting how that idea of helping others connects to the concept of leadership from Life's Learnings 3:7-11. It suggests that being a good leader is about so much more than just hitting targets.
It's about building relationships, inspiring people, and giving them the tools to be their best.
Right. And that means truly caring about the people you lead, being willing to hear them out, and building an environment where they feel supported.
The source also talks about how important it is for leaders to grow themselves if they want their teams and organizations to grow too. Leaders who are always trying to learn and improve are better at guiding people through change and uncertainty.
That reminds me of the idea of working on your business, not just in your business. It's about taking a step back from the everyday tasks and looking at the bigger picture, thinking long term.
So it's like being the architect who designs the plan for success instead of just the worker who lays the bricks.
Exactly. And being strategic often means getting opinions from people outside your bubble. The source mentions these peer groups where leaders can talk to others who faced similar problems and learn from them.
It's a good reminder that even the best leaders don't know everything. Sometimes you got to ask for help and learn from people who've been there before.
And Life's Learnings 3711 talks about embracing VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It's recognizing that the world is always changing and we need to adapt our leadership styles to fit.
It's about being flexible, okay with not having all the answers, and making decisions even when you don't have all the information.
It means being willing to try new things, learn from mistakes, and adjust our plans along the way. Remember that analogy about Kodak. It really shows what can happen when we don't change with the times.
It's a cautionary tale, for sure. It shows how important it is to keep innovating and stay ahead of the game. Do you think that's true for individuals too, not just companies?
Absolutely. The world is changing so fast that being able to adapt is crucial for success in everything we do. It's about having that growth mindset, being open to uncertainty, and always learning new things.
And that brings us back to resilience and growth, those big ideas we talked about earlier. Bouncing back from tough times, learning from challenges, and becoming stronger because of them. That's important for everyone, whether you're a person or a company.
It's about seeing obstacles as chances to grow, understanding that life isn't a straight line, but a path with twists and turns and unexpected detours.
And sometimes those detours take us to even better places than we could have imagined. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are your final thoughts? What are you taking away from all this?
What really stands out to me is how much potential each of us has to be resilient, to grow, to connect with others. Even with all the problems in the world right now, there's a sense of hope and optimism in these sources that I find really inspiring.
I feel the same way. It's been amazing going from exploring personal loss to the incredible things humans can create. It leaves me feeling hopeful and ready to make a positive difference.
And remember, this is just the start of the conversation. We encourage you to keep thinking about these ideas, connect them to your own life, and see what you discover.
Absolutely. This deep dive is just the beginning. The real journey is taking what we've learned and using it to build the future we want. Thanks for joining us.